So today is December 21st, 2024. We are here with Elijah and Marjorie Cardon, who were members of the Superior Branch for 9 years. President Cardon served as branch president for, I think, about 7 years. We're grateful to have them as part of our Globe Stake 50th anniversary video series. President and Sister Cardon, we'd like to start off by just asking you to tell us a little bit about your background. You're growing up, how your life, and basically until you got to Superior, and maybe tell us what led you to Superior. So there's a lot there, but if we could start off with that, that would be great.
Marjorie, why don't you go ahead?
I get to be first, okay. My family moved to Mesa, Arizona when I was 12. And so from Lovell, Wyoming, to get out of the snow, we moved to Mesa, close by the Mesa Temple. And so I had the opportunity of going to Mesa Junior High and Mesa High School. And I met Elijah my senior year as I was graduating from high school. He was just coming home from his mission in Switzerland. And so that's where we met, and we were married and sealed in the Mesa Temple in 1963.
I have to ask you about this. It's Lovell, Wyoming?
Yes, it's near Cody, Wyoming, and about 100 miles from Yellowstone Park.
I think most places in Wyoming are small. Is this a small town?
About 2,500 people.
And how old were you when you got to Mesa?
12.
12. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in Safford, and in 1941, and anybody can figure out that I am an old guy. And our father moved our family to Mesa when I was 3 years old, and grew up in Mesa and lived in Mesa, and went on a mission to Switzerland, and came back and met Marjorie, and we were married, as she said, in 1963.
How did you feel about your mission?
My mission was a good mission, a hard mission, and I was very privileged and happy to be able to do it.
Now, in Switzerland, I think, aren't there like 4 official languages or something like that? What language were you speaking, or did you speak more than one?
German. But there is a Swiss dialect, and they don't. And even when they speak High German in Switzerland, it's accented by their dialect, and so it was difficult to pick up on a High German. But it was German, and that's been a blessing in our life.
Okay. Now, can you tell us? You got married in the Mesa Temple. You had a family, and
yes,
can you lead us up to Superior? I guess
in the 70s we served together as the bishop of a ward for a little over 4 years, and then we moved to Mesa. We lived in East Mesa at that time, and then we moved to Mesa, and in Mesa. It was when we lived in Mesa, we were called to be a mission president in Hamburg, Germany, in 1985. And so we were there from 1985 to 1988.
What was that like? I know that's probably a big question, but tell us at least a little bit, what it was like to be a mission president and mission president's wife in Germany.
Oh, okay. Well, we took our children that ranged from 16 down to 8 months old. And so it was fun to have them with us on our mission. And it was exciting to have them be in the international school so they could meet children and friends from all different countries that were there as ambassadors from foreign countries in Hamburg. And so, and it was wonderful. Every day they, in school, learned to speak German. And so that has been a blessing in their lives as they've grown older, and our son and daughter have been able to use that German. She was called to the Frankfurt mission later on in her life. But it was an exciting time and a very, very busy time and a beautiful city. We loved it.
Marjorie, Tell Brian about the miracle of our adopted youngest child.
Well, we adopted a little baby. She was 2 days old. And I went to the hospital in Salt Lake and got her because we had signed up to adopt children through the Arizona Adoption Agency. And for 3 years, we were on the records, but we never got an offer because we already had children. And so they gave babies to other people. But anyway, we got her. And when he was called to be the mission president, then we all needed passports. And it was June, and we went to get the passports. And I had her birth certificate, but she had not been a member of our family legally for a year yet because she was only 8 months old. And they said, well, we can't give you can't take this baby out of the United States. We cannot give you a passport for this baby. And I thought, well, we're leaving next month. Well, and I need to be part of this mission. And so I called our the lawyer that was helping us with the adoption, and he said, well, I think that the judge is I was still in LA trying to get this. And he said, but I think that the judge told me that needs to sign this, because if the judge signs it, then you can take the baby out of the country. And he says, but I think he's on vacation, but I will go check. And lo and behold, on his way out of town, the judge came into the office because he had forgotten something.
In Phoenix or in...
It was in Phoenix was where the judge lived. And so our lawyer called him, and they said, well, he's not, but he went down to the office, and the judge walked in, and he signed the papers, and then our lawyer called us and said, it is on the next plane from Phoenix to the LA airport, and the plane will land at such and such a time, and they will hand you the paper. And so at 4:30, they had, in the afternoon before they closed the passport office, he handed me that. We got in the taxi, we went, and we got her passport, and it was a miracle.
Wow.
So she got to go with us, and she learned how to walk on all the stairs in the mission home. That's how she learned to walk. So that was a blessing.
So while you were serving as mission president and mission president's wife, how many missionaries did you have come through the mission?
Altogether, about 450.
What was that like to...
what a great...
I mean, you talk about your family, but you probably felt like parents to all those missionaries.
And they all stayed at the mission home when we would pick them up from the airport. They all stayed in our mission home, so I got to feed them all too, when they came and when they left.
So we were one of those places where the missionaries could come and stay in the mission home. That doesn't happen very often anymore. And so we had them in the mission home when they came and when they left, as she said. It was a great experience. We had some great miracles that happened. One thing, in looking back at a long life such as we've lived, it's easy to see the hand of the Lord in every step. Looking back, it's not so easy to see it when you're living it, but when you look back, you can really see it.
Well, tell us how you ended up in Superior.
Well, we had a friend that had remodeled a little tiny church in Superior, and he called me one day, and he was working with some things in his life, and he called me one day and said, "There's going to be a sealed bid auction for the high school, and would you be willing to help me make a bid?" And so we did, and we were successful. And in our bid, we had said that we would give the main building to the town. And so we made a gift of the main building to the town, a legal binding gift. But they wouldn't accept it. And so after several months, we said, listen, we have to maintain this building, and if you don't accept it, then we're going to withdraw the gift. And so they didn't. And so they didn't accept it, and so we withdrew the gift, and we wound up with the high school. And then a short time after that, our friend said, "Listen, this is just a little more than what I thought it was going to be, and so I'd like to have you buy me out." And so we bought him out, when we didn't intend to have the high school in the first place. And the high school was just in kind of bad shape because it hadn't been secured. And this is the part that you're going to probably want to cut out. So the first night, and so the first night that I personally stayed there, we hadn't fixed up anything. Youth were coming out of the valley and using it for parties in the high school. And of course the word was that it was haunted. And so they were outside the window, and I was in the upstairs classroom about 10 p.m. at night. And I heard them outside, and I opened the window, and I said, "May I help you?" And they screamed and jumped in their cars and left. That was the first night of our time at the high school, or my time at the high school. And,
So you're
then,
the ghost of the Superior High School.
and then Marjorie had a sister who has since passed away, living in Superior, who was having a difficult time with her testimony. And so when we returned from our mission, we decided that maybe we should go to Superior and maybe attend church with her. And this was the second mission for us. It wasn't this was in 2009, and we did attend church with her, and President Dalton was a true blessing and instrumental in bringing her back into activity. He came and went with me to visit Marjorie's sister one evening, and I think that was a turning point in her coming back into activity. In any event, we said, well, since our daughter is living in the home that we had raised our family in during our mission, maybe we can find another home. And so we began to remodel the inside of the high school, and we began. So it was Halloween, October the 31st. I think it was in 2010, yes, it would have been in 2010, and it was Halloween, and it was the first Sunday that we had moved into the high school.
Our membership would be changed.
And so we went to church, and the stake president said, "I'd like to talk with you privately," and so he did, and called us to be the branch president. And we thought for a moment that he might have been just doing a trick or treat, but it didn't turn out that way, and that was the beginning of our service as in the branch presidency in Superior.
Well, tell us a little bit about. Are there any stories or experiences while you're branch president that you think would be good to share on this?
Oh, yes. Hey, our whole experience in Superior was a blessing to us as individuals. Wouldn't you say that that's absolutely the case?
You bet.
And we met such wonderful people that we continue to be friends with. And just to name a few, Carl and Donna McRae, and I'm having who did we just give some nuts to? Not Frank. Oh, and of course the Domelines. Oh, what a blessing they were to the branch. Tyler Domeline, as a young man and a newly married person,
he was your counselor.
Lived in the. He actually didn't live in the ward boundary. He lived on a ranch that was just slightly outside of the ward boundaries. But the stake president allowed him to attend and he was called as a counselor. And then Ricardo Guerrero, who was living in Kearney at the time, was called as a counselor. And Carl McRae was. It was just a wonderful, 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 wonderful experience. And then just a beautiful, fine man was assigned to come to Superior, and that was Frank Dalmaline. And he came, and he didn't have a lot of experience in the church, but when he came to Superior, he was ready. And he was just a tremendous blessing. He and Carol.
And I'm sure you know he's the bishop of the Globe Second Ward.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
And he has been, I think it's over 5 years now.
That's right. That's what he said.
Yes.
And of course, Tyler Donwin served as the Miami Ward bishop for a number of years.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Fine folks.
We were both of there. Who's the other? Carolyn. Oh, Carolyn and
Ken Storr.
And Ken Storr. That's the name that I. So
They're great friends.
And it was just wonderful. Hey, and this has to go on the record. So while we were serving, and we're not taking any credit for this, but while we were serving, Uriel de la Rosa was baptized, and he's now been a member of the church for about 7 years, and is currently serving as the branch president, as you know,
Spanish
in the Spanish branch in Superior. And so he was taking the missionary lessons and was baptized. And the first Sunday after he was baptized, he came to church just glowing. He was just so excited and happy. And the meeting was about to begin. In fact, it was time for the meeting to begin. And he came in just with the happiest smile and went through the rows of people, shaking hands and introducing himself and saying, "I'm so happy, brother so-and-so and sister so-and-so." And we said, "Hey, let's just cool our jets and let this happen, because nobody is he really was happy to be there." And since then, he hasn't missed a beat, and he is now the branch president.
Sister Cardon, what were some of your thoughts?
Well, I
being in the
enjoyed
branch?
being asked to be the young women's president and get appointed. At that time, we had a lot of young ladies and a few young men, and be involved in activities that could catch their interest, and go to girls' camp with them at the state girls' camp, and enjoy sharing the light of the gospel, because a lot of the families were not all that active, but we would take them Christmas caroling to the town and out to Queen Valley, and we had some really, really good times, and I really enjoyed that. And I also felt very needed, because I could play the organ and the piano, and nobody could when we got there, so it was nice that I could share that little bit of talent of mine.
Organists and piano players are very special.
Are
We love them.
valued,
They are
highly valued.
So you lived basically for 9 years in an old high school. What was that like?
Lots of rooms to clean and a beautiful, huge gym. And our grandkids loved coming to visit on fast Sundays, that we would have them all come from the Mesa area. And they bring their basketballs and play in the gym. And it was just a great place. And we always had places in beds, because we turned the classrooms into suites. And so they could come and stay at Grandma and Grandpa's house and bring all their kids, and we could have them all at once together, and we had many, many, many happy times.
Hey, we have the distinction of having had the largest private residence in the state of Arizona, all 54,000 square feet.
Try to get that cleaned in one day.
And that's not all. We also have entertained the most private guests in our home of anybody on the planet. It's like we figured at one point that it was a little over 15,000.
So tell us about that. What do you mean by you entertained 15,000 guests there at the high school? Overnight. Tell us what you used the high school for and how that came about.
Shortly after we moved in, just a couple of years after we moved in, we had a close friend and business associate that came to the high school and said he was a counselor in a stake presidency in the valley, and said, "I'd like to bring my youth here for a stake youth conference." I said, and we said, "What? You want to bring him?" I mean, yeah. He said, "I said, well, it's still not fixed up." He said, "That didn't make any difference. We got a lot of guys that'll help, and so we'll bring." And that was the beginning. He brought his stake youth conference. The biggest one we had was the Chandler's stake. Just before they were divided, they had 13 wards, and they brought 650 people. That included the youth and the adults. And so every year we would have anywhere between 10 to 15 stake youth conferences in the high school, and we would have continued it except COVID hit, and nobody did anything. And then at the end of COVID, the church FSY program kicked in, and as you know, each state now is authorized every other year to take their youth to a facility, a college or some other place, for a youth conference. And so that kind of decreased the need for the high school. And then the high school was really supposed to be with the town. The town always wanted, although they loved having the youth conferences, because each conference would do a service project in town. I mean, they'd paint houses, or they'd clean up the cemetery, or they would clean up the street, or they would always have a project that they would do for the town. So the town was happy to have the people come, but the town also needed a town center and so to make a long story short, we sold the facility to the town of Superior so they could have it for their town center.
So, in addition to the using your home, the high school, for youth conferences and things like that, you also have a ranch that's within the state borders. Can you tell us about the ranch and what you've done with that?
Well, calling it a ranch is a little bit of an overstatement. The crazy place is only 16 acres. But it is the Pinto Valley Road. Most people think that it only goes north, a paved road that goes to the mines to the north. But it also goes south off of the 60, Pinto Valley Road, 7 miles west of Miami. And if you take that dirt road 6 miles, you come to the gate of what we call Madera. And it was purchased basically for the purpose of having it used by the church for youth camps. As a matter of fact, after the first year, there were 15 ward groups that came, 15 or so, 14 or 15 that came. And so we called the church headquarters and asked the church if they would care to indemnify us for church use of the place. And after some conversation, they asked for the record of what had happened, and they called back and said, "This is the first private property that the church has ever indemnified, and we will indemnify this for 1 year." And so they did send a letter of indemnification for 1 year, and at the end of that year, they reviewed the record of what had been used, and they said, "Well, this is a little bit cumbersome. Why don't we just do it every 5 years?" And so now the indemnification is renewed every 5 years, and they keep a record of what comes. And so every year there's between 15 and 20 ward groups that come. However, in the last couple of years, we have been under a project of expanding it. And so by the end of this coming summer, we'll be able to accommodate 2 wards at the same time. There'll be 2 completely separate camping areas that would accommodate a ward, or a stake would be able to come and then run the whole place and bring all of their stake, a youth conference. And what we've been working towards is that the young men would have their own camping facility, the young women would have their own camping facility, and then have some place where they could meet together for their meetings.
So this, I think sometimes it's called Madera Ranch. Is that?
Yes.
It has, you have been very gracious to let the stake use it.
Oh, it's been a blessing for everybody.
A number of years ago, in fact, it's the last time we had a trek. Mm-hmm. We did it, ending up at Madera Ranch, and that was certainly a great activity.
Yeah, everybody survived.
Everyone did survive. Can you tell us a little bit about the statues that are there?
Well, the statues are heroic size. There are 3 of them, and they are done by Russell W. Bowers. And he has recently served as the Speaker of the House of the state of Arizona. And at the time that these were done, the church was developing a visitor center in the southwestern corner of Wyoming, along the Sweetwater, where the history of the church has had lots said about it, and where the crossing in the wintertime, and where Brigham Young sent the brethren, and where there were 3 young men that helped cross the saints across the river that was frozen, that were not strong enough to cross by themselves. And so we participated with Rusty in the development of those statues, that is to say, the financial development. And so as you may know, when the church has an art project like that, they reserve, not the artist, but the church reserves the copyrights to the artwork. And even though it's contributed, and even though it's donated, they reserve the copyright. So we got a hold of the church and said, "Hey, listen, we know you have the copyrights, but we want 1 copy." And so the church agreed, and so we were able to make exact copies out of the same mold, the duplicates of the statues at the Sweetwater Crossing at the Visitors Center that the church owns in southwestern Wyoming. And these statues are bronze, and they are at Madera, and they depict the 3 young men that helped cross the saints across the Sweetwater.
Well, I know it was certainly was great for our pioneer trek to end at that point, and and Brother Bowers came and actually spoke to the youth about the statues and about the models he used for the statues. I think he used descendants of each of the people depicted in the statue. So,
yeah, and it's a very faith promoting thing when ward groups, father and sons, come to Madeira, that they can reference these statues and talk about them. It's like going to the crossing in Wyoming.
So, well, let me ask this. I guess two things is, as we have been talking today, have you thought of any other thoughts? Oh, we need to include this or that. And so I'll throw that out there generally, and then I'll ask if you'd be willing to complete the interview with a brief testimony.
Well, I would suggest that it would be very interesting to have Elijah tell you about when we decided to buy the property there at Madeira, and how the little well that they had was not working, and they wondered if they should purchase it. Tell them that it was a miracle. So that was the beginning of or we couldn't have done it.
Well, this may be part of a testimony, but looking back on life, if you look at it from the standpoint of the gospel of Jesus Christ, you can see the hand of the Lord in everything that's happened. That there is a grand plan for each and every one of us. Our only thing is, do we choose to follow it? And when we bought we went to Madeira initially because Rusty had acquaintance Pat Ioli, and she indicated that there was some neighboring property that was for sale. And by the way, this is very unique property because there's 35 acres of inholding in the center of the forest, and there's no other private property around it. And Madeira consists of about 16 acres, and our neighbor consists of about 19 acres, and so it's completely surrounded by forest. Well, when there were two wells on the property, we had put two pieces of property together, and both of them were about 100 feet deep, and one produced about a little over a quarter of a gallon a minute, and the other produced a little over a half a gallon a minute. And so they were not real satisfactory wells, and they would pump out after just a few hundred gallons, and then you'd have to wait for a day or two for it to recharge. And so I had a couple of hydrologists come up, and they said, well, this strata is very poor water bearing, and you shouldn't count on ever having any good water on this property. And so we had a couple of really good brethren come up. Carl and Chris Fuller, they were brothers. One was a serving bishop and another was on the high council. And they came up and did dowsing, or sometimes it's called witching, on the property. You hold two things in your hand and look for water. And it is very real. And I knew that these good brethren were not fooling. I mean, they're honest guys. And they came up and they said, the good news is there are 5 veins of water that cross in a particular place on the side of the mountain. And the bad news is that the good water is down about 400 feet. And so Rusty and I went out one afternoon and knelt down underneath the pine trees at Madeira and spoke with the Lord and said, hey, listen, we don't want to have anything to do with witching or the devil or anything like that. But these two good brethren have come out and said that there's water here, and and our purpose is to develop this for a church youth camp, and would like to know if we should proceed, and please help us with a good feeling. So after their prayers, we both said a prayer and out loud. And then after that, we stood up and said, well, how do you feel about it? And Rusty said, I feel okay. And he asked me, and I said, I feel okay. And so we went out and bought a D8 cat in order to build a road up. And the well driller came, and after a couple of days, I came back, and he was pulling the sticks out of the well rods out of the well. And I said, well, what have you found? And he said, oh, you have a wonderful, wonderful well. And I said, well, what can you tell me kind of about it? And he said, well, you're going to have about 25 gallons a minute. And that's more than you'll ever use for your residential use. And I said, well, how about if we put it back in the ground and drill a little bit deeper? And he said, well, if you do that, you run the risk of drilling a hole in the bottom of the well and losing all the water into a different strata. And I knew that the two good brethren had told us that the better water was down lower. And so I said, well, let's go ahead and do it. And so after about a half a day, he shut the drill rig down, and said, I just can't in good conscience go any deeper. And I said, well, how deep are you? He says, about 420 feet. And I estimate that this well will produce about 150 gallons a minute. And we had contracted for another drill site with him. And I said, well, maybe we ought to move and drill the other well. And he said, I'm not going to drill another well on this property. He says, this is more water than you'll ever use. He says, the only reason I would ever drill it is if you were going to plant cotton. And I said, we're not going to plant cotton. He said, so I'm not going to drill another well. and I'm saying that what a tremendous blessing that was from our Heavenly Father to allow us to have the water for people to use while they're there.
Thank you. Well, would you be willing to share a brief testimony, both of you?
Well, maybe I could just do a short, and we could let Marjorie finish.
Okay.
Hey, the church is true. The Book of Mormon is absolutely true. Joseph Smith, I've studied the Book of Mormon my entire life, read it multiple times, compared it with the Bible, appreciated it more and more. It is absolute impossibility. Joseph Smith could not have written the Book of Mormon. It is so filled with truths and wisdom. And of course, if the Book of Mormon is true, that means that Joseph Smith was a prophet, and that means that the church that was restored through him is the true church. We are so thankful to be members of the church. It means everything in our life.
And I also know that the church is true. I was born in the church, and I had the wonderful example of great parents who served with diligence in the church in the callings that they had. And I know that the gospel is true, and that we have a living prophet. It's amazing to hear him. He is absolutely the prophet that the Lord had in these last days to kick it all off more. And I'm grateful for the family that the Lord has blessed us with, and his hand in so many areas of my life that I never would have imagined that I would have the experience to do. And I appreciate his love and for the opportunity to have this little interview and kind of review our lives right before Christmas. I love it. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Well, thank you to both of you for talking with us as part of the Globe Stake 50th anniversary series. And it is Christmas time, so we hope you have a very Merry Christmas. And again, thank you for stopping by.
Thank you.